All right, Mr. Everything here, and every 5 years I get to rewrite all my tests to keep a truck license. Actually, now I have a bus license, which covers the truck. So, uh, as part of the licensing, I have to do a Z endorsement knowledge test. So this video is to help me study for my Z knowledge test. All right, so they're saying in the handbook that the normal running pressure of any air brake system should be around 100 to 120 psi. That's the normal running condition. It should never ever go less, be less than 80, and never ever be higher than 145 psi. So I'm talking psi here. It's a little easier for me. The kilopascals are a little harder to retain, but they go from the scale of dealing with the truck. You're dealing with this in kilopascals. You're dealing with the scale from 0 to 1,000 kilopascals. But we are talking about psi today because it's easier for me. So the air compressor will generally be mounted on the engine, the truck engine, and run by pulleys or belts. So the air compressor, after filling the system with air and reaches its running air pressure, which we said was 100 to 120 psi, it'll have a cutout when the actual compressor will be shut off and stop pumping air. And that cutout will be 20 to 25 psi above where the compressor kicks in or cuts in. So it'll be 20 to 25 above the cut in. And we're talking psi. And what they have in the line is a governor, and it's the governor that will tell the compressor or cause the compressor to cut in and cut out. So if your compressor cuts in at 80 psi, then it should cut out around 100 or 105, which is 20 to 25 psi above the 80 or the cut in. So the manufacturer of the vehicle will give their vehicles running pressure, and it better be above 80 and below 145, because that is the standard. So when the compressor cuts in, that means it's running and pumping air, compressing air. The first tank, because there are tanks that hold the air pressure, the first one is called the supply tank or the wet tank. And that tank is where you'll find the moisture and oil, and it needs to be drained daily. So, and you never drain any tank after the first tank. You always start at the first tank first, drain it, and then you can drain any other tanks, the primary and secondary as they're called. And they're called primary and secondary is because the next two tanks will feed two different wheel sets. Like usually secondary, I think, is usually the front wheels, and primary is the rear wheels. So that if one of the systems fail, then you will still be able to brake. So, so the primary is a primary line and a secondary line feeding the different wheel brakes, allowing you to stop. So after the supply tank, there is a one-way check valve preventing a backflow. You definitely do not want a backflow. So basically what you have is two braking circuits. You have the primary and the secondary. So after the first tank, the wet tank, you will have the air go to, the compressed air going to a primary tank, which will feed, in this case, the rear brakes. So this map or diagram is showing that the primary tank is feeding the rear brakes, and they're calling it the service line or the service brake system. And then the secondary tank is feeding the front brakes. Now, there's usually an air dryer which helps dry out the air in the line coming from the compressor before the first tank. That is called the air dryer. It will expel any moisture and oil at the cutout every time the compressor cuts out. And but vehicles that have this air dryer, because not all of them do, you still need to drain the tanks. Now, smart manufacturers in places like here, Ontario, Canada, will put in a alcohol evaporator. The alcohol evaporator will reduce the chance of freezing in the moisture that in the lines, and the oil gets thick if it gets frozen too. It doesn't freeze, but it will get thick. So the alcohol evaporator will reduce the chance of freezing in the lines, and you have to be careful to like put the specific products that are that the manufacturer says to use. You don't be putting normal alcohol from the pharmacy in there, or anything other than what they specify. Now, all air brake systems have to have a working air pressure gauge on the dash. They just have to have it. Sometimes they'll have one with one gauge with two needles that will show the primary or service brakes pressure and the secondary brakes pressure. So you'll actually have one gauge with two needles, or you will have two gauges, one for each system, the primary and the secondary, or the service brake and the secondary. Now, there will be safety valves. There must be safety valves in the system of the air systems. They will not go open until 150 psi. Now, remember, that's 5 over our the normal highest running pressure. And if your vehicle is depending on the safety valves to open, you have a problem. You cannot use that vehicle. The safety valves should only open in an emergency if the air is getting too high, signifying that something is wrong in the system. So the air system is defective if your safety valves are opening. And like I say, they don't open until 150 psi. Now also equipped on the dash will be either a visual or visual and audio warning if your air system drops below 55 psi on the average. Most manufacturers will cause their warning system to activate when the system reaches below 60. So when you test it to see if it's working, you can pump your brakes till the air comes out. You should see that warning system activate at between 60 and 55 psi. And the audio warnings are usually a buzzer, and the visual is usually a light. Now you must be careful when uh, checking things out around the truck, because when you have a full air system, the air can be exhaust at the brake valves, near the axles, air dryer, or the air tank. So all the places where air can exhaust, it is a dangerous situation. You do not want to be anywhere near where the air exhausts. You don't want your head near there. You don't want your face near there. So you must be careful and be aware of where the air exhausts in your vehicle. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but the governor is actually the controller of the cut in and the cut out pressure. So, and don't forget that the regular running pressure is from 80 to 145. So that's the governor that determines the cut in and cut out pressure. So remember that the compressor will cut in 20 to 25 psi above, the governor will cause the compressor to cut out 20 to 25 psi above where it's calling the compressor to cut in. And now, as a Z endorsement holder, you must have a knowledge of the slack adjuster system on the brakes of the vehicle. Only certified technicians can actually do the adjustment, especially on an automatic slack adjuster, but even if it's manual. But all drivers can be certified in the adjustment of manual slack adjusters with proper training. So the driver needs to be able to get the proper specifications on the push rod stroke, because the push rod stroke can never exceed the adjustment limit. Once the adjustment limit is exceeded, the vehicle must be placed out of service and repaired. And now there are different types of brake chambers, and they all have different adjustment limits. So the manufacturer should have a supplied measurements for the adjustment limits. So there are two types of slack adjusters. There is the long stroke slack adjuster or long stroke brake chamber, and there are the standard brake chambers. So the long stroke brake chambers will have three differences to the standard brake chambers. The air lines will attach to a square port before the brake changer, to a trapezoidal tag under the clamp bolt with the maximum stroke dimension written on it, and three, there could be markings or will be markings indicating that it is a long stroke brake chamber, and a warning to use only long stroke diaphragms. And so the standard brake chambers always have round air ports before the brake chamber. So what happens as the brake linings wear out, the brake shoes or brake discs, because there could be either type, there becomes a slack or space where the brakes are not may not make a full contact. So the uh, slack adjuster must be adjusted. So in the case of a driver without the certification, all you can do is check, and you have to check the measurement of the slack adjuster to make sure you're not driving a vehicle that needs to be adjusted. The most reliable way to check the pushrod stroke is to actually measure it. Now you need to know the brake chamber number size, which could be 16, 20, 24, or 30. And you need to know if the ports are standard or if the brake chamber is a standard brake chamber, which has the round air ports connection, or you need to know if it's a long stroke brake chamber, which will have the air ports square. And then you need to look at the chart for adjustment limits. So once you know what your chamber type is, you can see the maximum stroke allowed. So once the slack adjuster exceeds this maximum stroke, the vehicle must be taken out of service. This check must be done as part of your pre-trip inspection to make sure that your vehicle is roadworthy. The brake inspection must be done with the pressure at 90 to 100 psi, the engine off, and the service brakes fully applied, and the spring brakes released. So here we have the brake chamber showing the brake pedal fully released. So they put a mark right by the chamber there. Then the brake is fully applied, and that mark comes out from the chamber that much, and that is the measurement that you are looking for. And this concludes my study for the Z endorsement. And if there was anything else I missed, I may do a follow-up video. So if this helps anybody, I hope it does. But my main reason was for me to get this in my head and be able to play it in my car, pull the audio out and listen to it so that I can remember all this information. All right, take it easy. Mr. Everything signing out. Oh boy, I gotta go study for my D and my B, and I have to study the signs. Oh, I got lots of work yet. Maybe I'll do some more videos. Take it easy. Thank God I don't have to restudy for my M.